marijuana for medical purposes. We'll be having that discussion on Citizen Extra. Here's our news diary this morning. And in the news this morning, President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to hold talks with the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. The discussion is expected to center on bilateral agreements between the two nations. Also in the news at the Orange House, the ODM party headquarters members who were yesterday interrogated over recent chaos by the disciplinary committee will know their fate. The party's Central Management Committee, led by party leader Raila Odinga, will be receiving the report on the probe. In Baringo, controversy is looming after residents of Tiati constituency claimed that the Sunday attacks on their villages were orchestrated by the police. We'll be getting to the bottom of this and bring you up to speed on the latest. Also on our radar this morning, Chief Justice David Maraga has come out strongly on the independence of the judiciary. We'll tell you why he is a man on the spotlight ahead of the August polls. And once again, the county governments are on an offensive, accusing the national government of sabotage. We'll tell you why the Council of Governors Chairman Peter Munya wants the National Treasury to stop stifling them of funds. And finally, in business, the 150 million mobile phone-based bond M. Akiba is being listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We'll bring you up to speed on this development. All this is coming up on Citizen Extra. And in news shaping the day, once again, we look at politics around NASA, and we want to listen in to protests yesterday in Kakamega. Supporters of ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi protesting there, insisting that the flag bearer, NASA flag bearer, should be Musalia Mudavadi. But before we listen into that, our guest in studio this morning is Javis Bigambo. He's an analyst and will be looking at issues surrounding NASA politics, as well as, of course, what happened in Kakamega yesterday. Let's listen in to what exactly happened in Kakamega, as well as talk to Stephen Leto, who's on the ground. In studio this morning, political analysts Javis Bigambo and Churchill Saoke. Good morning, gentlemen. There's been talk of how to keep NASA united, and also talk on an imminent fallout. And as we are seeing there, supporters or disciples continue to express their opinions on their preferred candidate. Looking at what happened in Kakamega, is Mudavadi in or out of NASA? The protesters there chanting, no Musalia, no NASA. Let's start with you, Javis.
Well, first, we must appreciate that NASA is the brainchild of Musalia Mudavadi. It is the vehicle that he used to galvanize a new kind of momentum that enthused the initial code team. And what is a bit ridiculous with the kind of protests that were witnessed in Kakamega yesterday is that it would be very interesting to have Mudavadi move out of NASA, yet it was, or it is, his brainchild. Now, of course, you realize that NASA, from its points of conceptualization, was deemed to be a melting pot of national leaders bringing all people and communities together. But in the end, of course, we know very well that all seems not to be well in that house. Now, looking at, for instance, what has been happening through the rivulet that Wiper is feeding into NASA, and now looking at what is happening on the other side, the arm of Mudavadi, happening to NASA, then one comes to an inevitable conclusion that there is so much that is simmering beneath the surface, and that the principals need to look at. Of course, you know very well that when you look at NASA itself, it reminds us of the proverbial camel that was permitted to put its head in the tent. And here we are talking about specifically about code, especially ODM here. ODM badly needs and badly needed NASA. Needed a new concept, a new idea that would permit it to move away from the initial tethers that had tied ODM and Wiper together. And with this kind of idea, there is the brilliance that ODM wants to demonstrate that this house is here to stay, yes, and that whoever leaves it out of their own volition, but the people want to have NASA. Now, one worrying thing is this, that if, for instance, there is some kind of discontent in terms of the kind of agreements that they were supposed to come up with, and makes, say, Wiper to dissociate with NASA or move out, or Mudavadi to be discontent and move out to pursue other options, then NASA may remain a memorial site. It may remain a place that archaeologists and future historians will just want to find and look at for the kind of mistakes that made the opposition not to unite. Churchill,
your thoughts on the same talk of an imminent fallout should supporters and indeed allies continue leaking information on their preferred candidates as regards the presidency? And here now we see in Kakamega, just like we saw with the Wiper supporters, a clear preference that no Musalia, no NASA. Is Musalia in or out?
Thanks, Lillian. You know, in the art of negotiations, you will so often find that people want to do certain maneuvers that ups their stakes, especially within the negotiation table, and so often this is done outside of the negotiation room. And so, when you look at what is happening in NASA, I will give it a three-pronged hypothesis. The first hypothesis will be that, perhaps this could be an internal game within the NASA principles that ideally they have actually agreed, but they want to play into the public gallery by trying to keep the public busy, because this whole thing about the presidential nomination has actually kept them in public. People are debating, and that in politics is very important. But then again, the second hypothesis will be, could there have been the influence of the opponents of the opposition in what is happening in Kakamega, for example? Because this is possible. The government could, for example, infiltrate the opposition strongholds to bring a perception that our candidate has to be selected, and if not, we are getting out, and we can negotiate with other parties. The third hypothesis would be, you see, the whole thing about NASA is ideally it came from Mudavadi. And Mudavadi was a proponent of NASA, but that is still also questionable, because the impact of the ODM leader in trying to bring in NASA maybe through Mudavadi is also something of debate. But the key thing in my last hypothesis of this whole thing of NASA is that as you move towards elections, one of the biggest tools of politics is to try to keep your opponent gazing. And so as you keep them gazing, you make them to bring out their best foot forward while you hold back. And you hold them back from knowing your schemes by keeping them to think of your worst. And so this could also be a strategy. This could be a strategy for NASA. But the last thing could be, there could also be what my colleague has said, difficulties within the coalition among principals for them to agree. Which for me, I think that at this stage will be disastrous to them.
Javas, Churchill there is alluding to the fact that there could have been influence from Jubilee to create a picture of disunity within NASA.
Well, that is a hypothetical proposition. The question is, what was witnessed seemed to be a well-organized kind of demo at the grassroots. And one of the areas is, the deemed Mudavadi support basis. The thing is this: if at all it was something that is to the chagrin of Mudavadi himself, then he would have rushed to the public and in fact condemn, or in fact try to quell even the kind of demonstrations, so that it does not get to the national attention to indicate that maybe these vocalists that were witnessed yesterday could be drumming up, some kind of support, or could be speaking at his behest. The same way, for example, when Nyanza spoke, we didn't see Kalonzo come out even to condemn him or to distance himself from it, which tells you that in a very covert way, that these principals are speaking through their agents. So one cannot say, or cannot assume, that those speaking yesterday or demonstrating yesterday were Mudavadi agents, and that he wants to send out some kind of message. Question now is, even as they move towards trying to come to an amicable solution or agreement to have a presidential flag bearer, that if this is indeed strategic to them, then their strategic approach is quite unstrategic, because it's trying to demonstrate or to bring out some kind of fissures that are existing in there. Now, in the last election, Mudavadi tried to portray himself as the safe pair of hands, and that Kenyans should trust him. Today, then, the question is, even as they say that Raila should support Musalia, is Musalia still the safe pair of hands, or is Musalia the weak pair of hands that, in fact, even NASA cannot bet with him for the presidential candidature?
I want to throw the same question to you, Churchill. The fact that this seems to be a very well orchestrated demo. Just a day after the NASA top brigade met in Vipingo, we see a very clearly well organized demo. Do you think that Musalia was in the know, that indeed his disciples would be fronting for his cause?
Thanks, Lillian. I can assure you the principal Musalia Mudavadi was well aware. Just the same way we said the other time that Kalonzo was way aware of the things that was happening in Wiper. Because my thinking is that this is very strategic, and as my colleague has spoken, it is very strategic for them to up their negotiations. But then, thinking about it, this whole thing about these principals negotiating, we might look at it also from the perspective of the 2017. But then, I don't know, but this is just my weird thinking. Looking at the 2022 post the person who is going to win the presidency in these coming elections, could there be a projection that we want to, maybe Musaladi want to create a perception that I have done a lot of sacrifice, so that when it will come to maybe inheriting the ODM leaders' political zone, then I will be the best bet. Because I mean, Musalia still has a long way, and he can actually be able to capitalize on the support base of the former Prime Minister by trying to perceive that by me supporting you, I have done so much sacrifice that I'm the best to succeed you after your presidency if you win. And that will be a game now between him and Kalonzo Musyoka. Because when you look at this whole thing, I think that the war kind of is not necessarily between Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi, but per se between the former Vice President and the former Deputy Prime Minister, in my opinion. It is about...
Right, and Java, still on the same, Kalonzo's supporters pulled a similar stunt in recent weeks, but they've since gone quiet. Could this be a strategy that Musalia Mudavadi is now pulling as well, a similar strategy so as to up his chances?
Evidently, yeah, because in a way Musalia Mudavadi could have been worried by an emboldened Kalonzo Musyoka, because the way the Kamba nation spoke and the leaders that support Kalonzo Musyoka, and in fact the demonstration of unity by the Kamba leaders themselves, is one thing that made Kalonzo Musyoka more prominent or more visible within the NASA framework as compared to the other, especially Mudavadi and Wetangula. But you see, it's because Kalonzo Musyoka was caught between a wall and thorns, very difficult place. Because one thing, Kalonzo Musyoka realizes that if he does not rise right now and in fact inject new energy and strength in Wiper, and then after this election Wiper diminishes, then there is the prospect of Maendeleo Chap-Chap being an alternative political vehicle for future political vehicle for the Kamba nation. So Kalonzo Musyoka faces a couple of battles. One, he has to fight for his political survival. Two, to sustain the energy, the relevance, and the power, political power of Wiper Party within the Kamba region and possibly even nationally. But now that there is also a new child on the block, Kalonzo knows, and by the demonstration of a couple of defectors from other parties moving to Maendeleo Chap-Chap of Dr. Mutua, then Kalonzo realizes that there could be some political future in Maendeleo Chap-Chap, and if he has to curtail that, if he has to stop Dr. Mutua and Maendeleo Chap-Chap from moving, then he has to make sure that he moves with terrific speed to national prominence and also to sustain his his Wiper Party.
And just as we proceed with this conversation, looking at the affiliate parties and looking at one of the core principles, we see Ford Kenya's Moses Wetangula, being a bit aloof, for lack of a better word. We don't see the same aggression coming from his end, and his supporters as well seem to be pretty quiet in comparison to the other core principles. Would you say that he's content with taking a back seat? Chacha, let's hear from you.
I think that, well, there's a possibility that he could be quiet because he has, somehow, if Mudavadi has a higher stake in NASA, then he has to play a second fiddle. But I don't expect him to bring a competition in NASA, because it will be a competition between him and Musalia. Looking at the politics of the Western nation, it has always been that there has been some sort of infighting amongst the leaders. Actually, uniting the two persons is one of the most difficult tasks. And so if a rift emerges, it might emerge just between Musalia and Wetangula. But that being so, again, you look at Ford Kenya, and as in terms of its political mileage in Western Kenya, I mean, if it emerges as wanting to get a higher stake in NASA, I don't see whether it will really be in his interest. and if it was so, maybe he should have done it before Musalia Mudavadi.
Javas, the protesters yesterday in Kakamega, the Musalia Mudavadi quote-unquote disciples, seem to have, and they were quoted as saying that they have a problem with who should have the final say in who the flag bearer should be. They are opposed to the technical committee, and they feel more confident that the delegates drawn from the different affiliate parties should have the final say.
Well, as we approach the period of Easter, we know very well that disciples get to be very funny. They tend to desert their master at the hour of need. And while they have spoken very well about who should have the final say, question is, can they sustain that voice to the end? And can the technical committee or even the NASA principals heed their call? In the end, We know very well that that technical committee was a framework that was put together with the agreement of all the principals so that they could come up with a kind of an advice or opinion as to which should be the best way forward. However, of course, there is the place of wisdom in what the protesters were saying yesterday. The place of progressive democracy is that we need to have a majority speaking out or pronouncing themselves, so that that majority, if that majority could mean the delegates of all the affiliate parties, then such should have been the case and not just the place of the technical committee. In the end, still, you realize that whether they want Musalia Mudavadi to be the flag bearer, or others want Kalonzo Musyoka to be the flag bearer, or others calling on Wetangula to be the flag bearer, and others Raila Odinga, then the question will come down to a few specifics. Who has got the energy, the charisma, the national support that can drive an entire campaign? All right? And when you look at all these things, then you realize that actually we cannot speak of options, because we will lead only to one individual. And that individual, of course, inevitably is Raila Odinga. Because when you look at NASA right now, if you were to remove Raila Odinga from the equation, NASA is a critical shell. And so in the end, whether Mudavadi speaks, Kalonzo speaks, or Wetangula speaks, I think so much strength here will be increasingly dependent on what Raila Odinga speaks or says, what direction he determines to take, because actually he is the center point of this NASA thing. And
Churchill, Javas is alluding to the fact that ODM party leader Raila Odinga is the unifying factor in NASA.
I would say that he is ahead in the game, and he began whatever we are seeing in Wiper and ANC are as a result of the fact that this ODM and the brigade went ahead in their game plan. If you think about it, the initial stages of the NASA coalition is that, you know, I was having a feeling that, you know, think about it. Initially we had CORD, and this guys realizes that, you know, we got three variables whom we had agreed with, but now how do we create a situation where we go to renegotiate and have equal opportunity for all of us? Let's include another variable and have, now they brought in Musalia Mudavadi. And interestingly, the whole thing about NASA was actually brought in by, it was introduced by an outsider of CORD. So as you can realize what was happening behind the scenes and who was actually pushing things behind the scenes to make them visible. My thinking is that I think that the former Prime Minister must have been very strong in pushing this, all the things. So the systems within the NASA coalition in terms of this election, he's already ahead of the game. And the other coalition partners are now trying actually to, they are reactive measures, because they are realizing that, you know, this guy is already ahead and is already brought a perception in the public that is best fit for this. Now what do we do? So these are now the reactions of that. Now, as to whether these reactions can really up the stakes for negotiations for them to counter the perception and move up number one and Raila Odinga becomes number two is something worth of debate. But in my thinking as of now, my thinking objectively as of now, I think that what the other coalition partners are fighting for is actually number two.
All right, and as you hold on to that thought, gentlemen, let's cross over to Trans Nzoia County, where our political reporter Stephen Leto is on standby, and we want to get more on him as regards the protests in support of ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi taking position as flag bearer of NASA. Stephen.
Very good morning to you, Lily and Muli, there in studio. Indeed, we are coming to you live from Trans Nzoia County in Kitale particularly, whereby it's one of the region voting bloc in the Western Kenya voting frontier. And there has been, just like the discussion you're having there in studio, Lillian, there has been a lot of political debates, a lot of political activities going around. Remember yesterday we had toured the other side of Bungoma, Kakamega, where there was some sort of demonstrations that were going on there in terms of Musalia, Wetangula, Raila, tickets for presidency in the NASA ticket. And so those are the issues that are going here, a simmering battle between Ford Kenya, ANC parties in this region, as well as ODM, Lillian, really bringing into the fore the possible what is seen as a Western battle for that particular NASA ticket. And so those are the same politics that keeps on going around this particular region. When we came here in Trans Nzoia, there was also a lot of activities. Remember, this is one of hotspots of votes where each particular candidates are also trying to get what they term as a share of the voters' pie in Trans Nzoia County. Remember, there has been also a lot of eyes focused on Trans Nzoia County in terms of what is going on in terms of the political, social, and economic activities. The Jubilee government and as well as the opposition have been eyeing all of them, this particular region being a cosmopolitan town or a cosmopolitan county, if you like, Lillian, and that is why there has been a lot of interest in this particular county. Remember, the governor in this region is from Ford Kenya, that is Governor Patrick Haemba, who is the current governor, who is also seeking his re-election, intends to run a re-election bid to retain his seat as governor. And so those are some of the issues. On the other side, they're also preparing themselves. The Jubilee side are also trying to brace up for the same battle, to seeking to see that whether they are able to unseat the current governor. And so there has been also an issue of a negotiated sort of democracy from the other side of the Jubilee party, where they has until now they are not sure on how they are going to face off with the incumbent Patrick Haemba. And so those are some of the issues we are keeping an eye on here in Trans Nzoia County, Lillian. We will also be able to tour and see what exactly is happening in Trans Nzoia County. What are some of the re-election bid bases? What are the bases that the opposition has in terms of fighting a battle with government using one of their own here? That is the governor for Trans Nzoia, who has been doing all he can in terms of putting all this machinery in place, putting on his development record in terms to show that the opposition governors per se have been up to their task as governor in terms of just uplifting the livelihoods of the counties. And so we've been able since morning just to traverse some places here. We've seen a low-key activities. Remember, they are waiting for the party primaries that are set to kick off very soon. That is next week. That is for the Jubilee party, for instance. They're bracing up for the political parties primaries. But I've seen the governor here is here, the governor for Trans Nzoia, just to tell us what informs the politics for Trans Nzoia County. What exactly is driving the politics, the political agenda for this cosmopolitan county. And so here is Governor Patrick Haemba, who will tell us what informs the politics of this particular region.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Trans Nzoia. You've rightly said that this is a highly cosmopolitan county. It actually represents the face of Kenya in terms of communities. Now, being as such, it also means that the politics of this place is delicate, because some communities are aligned towards certain parties. But as a governor of Trans Nzoia, I consider myself a governor for all the people of Trans Nzoia, irrespective of their communities or religion or even political parties. I want to give you an example. Last time when I was elected, I came in on Ford Kenya. I'm still on Ford Kenya. But because of the cosmopolitan nature of this county, immediately I came in, I formed a government that brought on board most of the communities, and we didn't even care from what party that person came from. And partly that has helped to make Trans Nzoia a very peaceful place. You don't have major fights here or disruptions in this region. I want to continue like that when it comes to the next term, I'm seeking re-election again on Ford Kenya. But as I said, I got support from across the communities, from across the parties, because of my agenda. My election and re-election is hinged on my programs, the programs I want to do for the people of Trans Nzoia, not myopic view that I belong somewhere or from a certain tribe. I am selling myself as a person who is going to drive the development agenda of this county. My re-election is basically hinged on my performance as a governor, as a first governor. We had many challenges, but I want to assure you where we are standing here is one of my flagship projects. You can see it's a Trans Nzoia Referral Hospital, a very well-designed modern hospital that will take 350 beds. It stands on 5 acres. The area is 17,000 square meters. In just 16 months, we are at 80%. We want to finish constructions, hopefully by July. Now, this goes to demonstrate that I'm focused mainly on delivering the development agenda. And it's the development agenda that will cause the people to re-elect me. Now, why the hospital? In this region, we all went to Eldoret, and I can tell you Eldoret Moi referral was catering for about 15 million people from several counties. And we had trouble, and the place is crowded. You go to my district hospital, it's so crowded, people sharing beds. So we thought this facility is very timely for the region, not only for Trans Nzoia, for the entire region here, once complete. 350 beds, 6 theaters, 16 ICU beds, name it, private wing, all included. Just behind you, a very modern mortuary that is not anywhere in this region. So we think this hospital is going to match, if not overtake, some of the private facilities in Nairobi.
Now, the coming week is what we term as a heated week of nominations, party primaries, a lot of political activities. What are we expecting to see? How is that going to affect in terms the ongoing projects in terms of that you see the NASA, the National Super Alliance are also preparing for their nominations, all the political parties. You being a member of Ford Kenya, the Jubilee is also doing the same.
Yeah, the politics sometimes tends to disrupt development. But in Trans Nzoia, I'm very focused on my development agenda. I do the politics, but it doesn't disrupt my development agenda. We are now standing here, I should be in the field. You walked in town, you don't even see one of my posters. I don't even have a poster in town, because I believe that people have seen what I've done. I know the parties have to handle primaries, and I think in our political cycle, primaries are the most delicate area because of the ability or inability of political parties to conduct this major exercise. The funding aspect, integrity aspect, these aspects are going to boil. It now depends on how each political party will handle these nominations. You are bound to see a lot of outcry after the nominations. People being rigged or the process was not conducted properly. But we believe, since this will be party affairs, it will not affect the development per se of Trans Nzoia, because things will be limited to each party. If it's ODM, ODM will carry its own issues in-house. We are just asking people to avoid violence. Please conduct your business in a peaceful manner. Yeah.
Finally, now that you're touching on politics, there has been a sort of simmering rivalry between Ford Kenya and ANC in this region. You being a Ford Kenya member or governor, what are some of the logistics you've put in place for the nominations exercise down to the MCA level?
I'm not sure whether there's been a rivalry that would catch anybody's eye between Ford Kenya and ANC. Obviously, ANC has some candidates around here, just like other parties have. Jubilee have even more candidates here than ANC. So I would have preferred if you had asked whether how Jubilee will do against Ford Kenya, for example. But so there's no rivalry between Ford Kenya and Jubilee. Ford Kenya has more candidates in most of the positions across the county. ANC has candidates, but in a limited manner.